Hello, everyone. So, welcome back. And we are now beginning the last session of the conference. We have an amazing panel discussion here. The new African scientist, we brought in 4 individuals from different African countries that are forging their own unique paths in STEM. I've gotten to know these 4 individuals in different ways over the past year, and they're all very inspirational. So I don't want to take too much time talking. I would love for them to introduce themselves. So I think we'll go in alphabetical order. So we'll start with Bonaventure. Could you do a brief introduction of yourself, where you're from, what you study, and things that you do outside of your studies?
Thank you, Natasha. My name is Bonaventure Lusu, and I am from Benin Republic in West Africa. And I'm actually currently based in Bremen, Germany. I have a bachelor in mathematics from Russia, and I'm actually pursuing my master degree in data engineering. So about my studies, I can say I am involved in researches, most likely natural language processing for African low resource language, and also the applications of AI in healthcare. Yeah, so that's basically about me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction. Just to let people know, Bonaventure has a bit of issues with his camera, so you'll be able to hear him but not see him. Okay, so next we go on to Doreen.
Oh, thank you, Natasha. Hello, everyone. My name is Doreen Onyinye Anene. I am Nigerian, and I'm so excited to be sharing the stage with the VSC team and everyone here. So I'm a PhD student studying animal science at the University of Nottingham, and my research is basically focusing on the variations in hen flocks and how they influence or how they're associated with egg quality in chickens. When I'm not PhDing, I am most likely working on the STEM Bell, my organization. I founded the STEM Bell in 2017, and the STEM Bell simply means a beautiful girl in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM. And what we do at the STEM Bell is we're trying to close the gender gap in STEM fields, and we're doing this by attracting, retaining, and then advancing girls from low-income communities into STEM subjects and then into STEM careers. One of the highlights for me, I would like to smash my imposter syndrome, is to say that in 2019, I was named the Innovating Woman in Science by Estee Lauder and Nature Research. So yeah. Oh God, that's out. I think I'm going through my imposter syndrome now. Yeah, pleasure to meet you, and I'm looking forward to sharing and learning.
Thank you so much, Doreen. So then my alphabet is messed up. Who's first, K or J? J. James, you're up next.
Hello. Yeah. Thanks, Natasha, for having me. My name is James Azam. I'm from Ghana, and I'm currently studying at the University of Stellenbosch for a PhD in mathematics, but specializing in infectious disease modeling. And my research is about using mathematical modeling to improve the way we deliver vaccines to children who need them the most, especially during measles outbreaks. And you know, measles is one of the top killers of children under 5 years. So that's where my PhD contributes. And when I'm not PhDing, I'm taking pictures. I'm a photographer, I'm a musician, YouTube. Yeah, it takes a lot of my time. I have a YouTube channel by my name, and I just provide tutorials for academic work, things to help improve the way we do our work, to automate how we work. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome, thank you. And last but of course not least, Kim.
Hey everybody, I just want to thank the organizers first and foremost. I know they are running on little sleep and weird sleep, and you've done just a fantastic job. So thank you guys. I'm Kimberly Tommy. I am a PhD candidate in biological anthropology at Wits University. I am a South African. Essentially, my research looks at the evolution of bipedal walking, so how it is we came to walk on 2 legs, and if our bodies are well adapted to this, or if our modern lifestyles are kind of affecting our bones. So that's my research. And essentially, when I'm not PhDing, I'm talking all the time or writing all the time. So I work as a freelance science communicator. I write for a wonderful YouTube channel called PBS Eons. And that's working with an international team where I bring fossil stories, particularly from the African continent, to a broader stage. So we do these fun animated shows on YouTube. I also write and create content. I'm just involved a lot in science communication on a freelance basis.
Fantastic. Such a wonderful, diverse panel. Everyone doing a PhD or master's and something else. I don't know how we find the time and the bandwidth, but this is the life we've chosen. So I'm going to start with the questions. And I think the first question I'd like to direct to Doreen. So as a young African scientist, what is your vision for the future of STEM and research on the continent?
So to answer your question, this first question, I'm going to like to step into the shoes of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and say that I have a dream that one day, someday, and hopefully very soon, governments in Africa, captain of industries, policymakers, industries, companies in Africa would start to realize the need, the importance, the place and the power of science and research that is done in Africa by Africans and for Africa. I hope that one day these key players, these key important decision makers start to realize these things and not just realize the place and power of science, but start to invest in it. How would they invest in it? Increasing the budget that goes into science and research, supporting science, research and researchers, getting companies to pay or contribute money towards a research trust fund or a research fund. I mean, call it tax, call it anything they want to call it, legally, but, companies that are producing stuff in Africa need to start, having grant funds, trust funds, research funds that other researchers, science researchers can get into and do research. I hope that, corruption gives way for all of this to happen, but I really look forward to a period, a season, a time when a lot more money, resources is channeled into science to encourage researchers and research. My second dream is I dream of a day or a season or a period when the next generation of scientists in Africa are fully understood, fully supported, and fully encouraged. Right from, improving relationships and between supervisors, students, mentors, and students, all the way to the cradle, science education advocacy, going back up to encouraging early career sciences, creating more grant scholarship opportunities, conferences opportunities. I would like to add here that I only had my first poster presentation when I became a PhD student. At that poster presentation, I met undergrads. I met master's students, and I asked myself, why don't we do that in Africa? So I'm really looking forward to a period where there is a platform that is given to whippersnappers in Africa so that they can start to, play in that space. We don't have to wait until, everyone is old before we become active. I'm really looking forward to when lighting ladders would be sent down to up and comings to encourage them into science and support them while in science and in research. So those are my two dreams for the continent with regards to science and research.
Thank you so much for that amazing answer, Doreen. I think a lot of us can resonate with that dream. I think most of us actually want this, for there to be more investment within the continent in terms of research in STEM. Does someone want to add anything to that question, or I can move on?
I would like to add that I came across a certain research article somewhere in 2018 where they studied research collaboration across faculties and the various departments in the world, and it was found that mostly the developing countries tend to collaborate with themselves, and African countries mostly. So there's the core and there's the periphery. And African countries mostly fell on the periphery, where we don't collaborate with ourselves. And even if we wanted to do high impact work, we would only collaborate with the core countries, the US, Russia, China. So one dream is for us to build the capacity to be able to collaborate with ourselves. So internal collaboration within Africa itself is not really present. And so we should work more towards collaborating with ourselves, building networks with each other through conferences like this in order to move Africa more towards the core, because there's a lot of talent here, but it's untapped. Yeah, and another thing to add is the publication supply chain. The fact that most of us publish in journals outside of Africa, we should. There are initiatives that have started towards starting high impact journals in Africa, and we need to first of all patronize them, because a journal is only high impact if it's patronized. And so patronizing them and working towards like starting more journals in Africa will also help improve our science. And on the aspect of collaboration as well, African countries should also look at collaborating on large projects. So we don't have like large physics projects, and the biggest one I'm aware of is SKA, and that has a network of about 8 countries, I think, in Africa. There should be more of those, like CERN in Europe, and yeah, those things tend to unite countries and all of that, and we need to work on those too. Yeah, that's what I want to contribute.
Thank you. Excellent answers. And you brought a lot of valid points in terms of things that we actually need to start working on developing so that we can achieve these dreams in the future. So on that note, I'm going to pivot a bit. So I think from your introductions, it's very clear that you're all involved in quite a lot of things. And speaking from experience, it can be quite taxing and tiring to be engaged not only in the studies, but also in extracurricular activities. So I wanted to ask you, Kim, I'll start with you. How do you find the motivation to do extracurricular activities outside of your PhD? And in what ways is doing these extracurriculars actually making you a better scientist, if they are, that is?
So the weird thing is, when I was in high school, I got decent marks for science, but I actually excelled in English, and particularly in the literature aspects. Like, I love that you could create worlds with words and images with words. And so I think the science communication was kind of a combination of different loves. I love science, but I love making it accessible to people. The motivation is definitely, firstly, making it accessible. I think sometimes we take for granted, because we are surrounded by the jargon and surrounded by the technicalities, and we understand what's going on. But we ultimately need to be working towards creating informed societies, because we don't want our science to stay within the walls of our institutions. We want it to touch the lives of people who it will affect. We want it to radiate into policy making. In terms of making time for this, yeah, that's always a challenge, I think, for anyone doing any form of studies. You're always trying to juggle your time. And something I found that works for me is I set goals. I don't kind of do a 9 to 5. I'm not going to lie. I take afternoon naps. I take like 11 a.m. naps sometimes. But I do set goals, whether it's for the week or for the day or for the month, in terms of my research, as well as my extracurriculars and my science communication, just kind of to keep me on track with what it is I need to do, and also so I don't feel overwhelmed by everything that I'm doing. I think it makes me a better scientist. So I mean, it's easy when you're working in SciComm, you're engaging with a lot of different people from different fields. And one thing I can say is it's renewed my passion for science. It's given me a broader scope of what's going on in the world and what's going on in Africa and South Africa and what these amazing researchers are doing. So it inspires me, it pushes me to push the boundaries of what I'm doing, and to at the same time work actively, just like you guys do all the time, to highlight other Africans and uplift other people. And I think that's ultimately, it makes everyone a better scientist, I think, if you explore beyond your comfort zones.
Absolutely, excellent answer. I 100% agree with that. I think, interestingly, pursuing other things that are not necessarily your core, you find that you learn new skills that you can actually integrate into your work. And actually, I'd like to ask Doreen, because you're also running a nonprofit, this NGO, the STEM Bell. How has that been for you in terms of finding motivation, and has it actually improved your PhD experience?
Yes, I'm going to be very honest. It has improved my experience because sometimes I just want to decompress, and STEM Bell, working on the STEM Bell is just my happy place. You know, it's just a good place to just decompress and do something totally different. And I'm always motivated by Michelle Obama's quote. I think she made this quote during one of her last outings, you know, as a first lady. She said that she was encouraging young people to get a good education and then use that education to create a country, a community that is worthy of their boundless promise. For some reason, I've held on to that quote, right? And I just feel like there's so many people out there who need my shoulders, who need my platform. So I'm using the education that I have to give back to them through the STEM Bell, right? So when I think of, you know, when the blows come, I just think of the people on the line, you know, who are actually waiting for my manifestation, and then I keep going. You know, I think of the smiles, you know, how their lives would change. I'm a beneficiary of help. I'm a Schlumberger Faculty for the Future Foundation Fellow, and that scholarship changed my life. It gave me a platform that I probably wouldn't have been able to afford, right? So when I think of the destinies, the future of these future scientists, hopefully, I'm like, I can't give up now. I keep going. I keep working through the night, through the day, and, you know, get through.
Absolutely, absolutely. Using your work to actually motivate you to do better as well in your PhD. That's a beautiful sentiment. Okay, so going from that, I wanted to ask Bonaventure. So, in what ways do you wish to see academia change, and how do you think that we or you as a young scientist can play our role in facilitating that change?
Yeah. So how do I think academia can change and everything? Um, well, I think we should start by going down to the roots. What do I mean by going down to the roots? Like uh, many of us here mentioned, like I think Doreen mentioned, she had her first poster presentation when she was a PhD student. Personally, I had my first one when I was bachelor student in Russia, and up to now, I think I have, let me say, 7 publications. When I tell people I have 7 publications, they say, "Whoa, you're a genius, you're a geek, or something like that." But I honestly don't think I am a genius. I honestly don't think I am a geek and everything. And if I go back to Africa, this is something that is completely wrong. Like you won't see any undergraduate or graduate student publishing papers. And when we talk about academia, we're talking about research, right? I have met, when I was in Russia, I have met people who were like 24, 25, who are already doctors. But we don't get that chance in Africa, like to have your PhD or something. Either you go abroad or either you stay and study for a long time. So we should, if I can say, demystify the thing. And I would mostly talk as let me say AI scientist. I would like, I think that we should introduce let me say programming and coding already from the early stages of education, so that people won't take it like a myth. When I talk about AI today, people think like it's God. Like they will come to me and tell me, "Oh, can you make an AI that does this, does this?" What I ask them is, "Can you by yourself do it? If you can, don't ask a machine to do it." So academia is research, is theories, practice, and everything. And to change the thing, we should make people get used to it since the early stages of education, from primary school to high school. And we also don't have much universities in artificial intelligence. Most of us have to go abroad to study abroad. Like we don't have enough universities here in Africa studying the stuff, the subject, and it makes everything. Let me call it biased because you want to study something, but you don't have the opportunities. So either you travel or either you stay and then you get lost. Like your ambitions and everything are gone. But then even if you have your degree abroad and you come back, today people are still viewing AI as, let me say, a myth in Africa. So government don't believe in it. As a simple example, the stuff I'm actually working on, the font French no machine translation, like I haven't got any support from my government, nobody, right? But I guess I'm getting support much more from maybe people from France, people from Germany, people from maybe Canada, something like that. But from our own government, to which this thing will be profitable, I'm getting nothing. I don't even know if they know about it. So when they come back, still the thing is not profitable. I mean, still people cannot acknowledge and recognize the knowledge and the work at the right value. So we all want a place where we are valued and where we are living
Yeah,
well, something like that. Because if we are not well, we cannot do anything. So as a result, we just have to go back abroad where people will actually compensate and like treat us at our real value, something like that. So
absolutely.
I think this question is really broad, but to sum up, I think we should, from early stage of education, we should introduce all the, let me say, computing class. I'm talking as an AI scientist. We should demystify the thing. Like people shouldn't be seeing PhD as someone who's a genius, someone who is like, no, it's
Yeah,
just a step. And people in PhD here will let me say confirm it. There is much more of a hard work, perseverance down of being genius or something, right? So yes, and we should learn to value our talent. And as James has said, we should promote much more research. Doreen also has said it, create more research centers, fund them because we cannot do anything on our own, something like that. So
absolutely.
I
No,
think
thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Brought up many, many brilliant points. And absolutely, I think there is that issue that I think for some African scientists, if they study abroad, they have that fear that if I go back, will I be valued? Will I be paid in line with the education that I have now? And that's something that definitely has to change because we're losing so many people outside of Africa because they're not sure what their opportunities are back at home. Um, so a lot of great points there. And now I want to pivot into a topic that I'm quite passionate about, and that I think we should talk about always within the context of academia and research and being in science, and that's mental health. I think would be a bit remiss if we didn't touch on that topic a little bit. So what I wanted to ask James is how have you actually implemented any practices that have helped you with ensuring that you're maintaining a healthy mental health, essentially, because it is quite well known that academia is notoriously known to really mess with people in terms of the mental health. So how have you kind of navigated that? And do you have any tips that you can share with other PhD students or masters, undergrads, or anyone really within the space who maybe has struggled with that?
Thanks for the question. um, Mental health is so broad that I can't talk about it in even an hour, but I'll try. As a mathematician, I tend to think about things in terms of categories. Before I started my PhD, I read a lot about PhD and how to do it and stuff. And the most common thing that went through all of that was the stress, the mental health, the depression, anxieties that people were experiencing. So speaking of categories, when I started my PhD, I decided to split the academic work routine into categories. So what do we normally do on a daily basis? We work, and by work, I mean anything. You do the research, you do experiments, you write it up, then you submit it to your peers. Your peers could be your supervisors. They revise it, they give you feedback, and then when it's done, when it's published, you go back again and then you start work. in all of those categories, something there can impact your mental health. So for me, it was about building safeguards in each of those stages. So in the work stage, there's a lot that can go wrong. You can be physically tired and all of that. And then it translates into your mental well-being. So you build safeguards about how to maintain your mental health in that state in terms of work-life balance. Tana earlier on today said, find something outside of your work that validates you. When you're performing that experiment and it doesn't work, how do you go about it? Do you continue working on the experiment, or do you go to play football and then come back and then something hits you and then you... So there are very basic things. I actually wanted to start off with mental health. Why are we talking about mental health at an African conference? Africans don't talk about mental health. But yeah, it was going to be a bad joke, so I stopped. So yeah, in terms of work, find work-life balance, find a support system that helps you. Your lab members, all of those people will help you. People are most likely to have experienced the same thing. In terms of the revision feedback cycle, it's much more broader. So think about body language. Think about how your supervisor treats you. Supervisor-student relationships contribute a very large sum to the depression pool. And you need to find ways to manipulate that. There's a lot of research on how to fix that, but there's not much that has been done about it. So in the supervisor-student relationship feedback cycle too, what I did was I initially identified my problem, which was I wasn't very good at taking feedback. So I bought a book called Thanks for Your Feedback. Yeah, I bought that book. I read it. It broke down the feedback cycle and everything about it. And I learned a lot. Feedback is not only about someone leaving comments, track change comments on a Word document. It's about how your workmates treat you. It's about body language. It's about my supervisor says this is good, but their face is not really reflecting what they are trying to say. So how do you pick up all those things? Because in the end, they affect your being. Especially, it can magnify your imposter syndrome and all of that. Imposter syndrome affects your mental health. The last thing I learned this year was the cognitive behavioral therapy cycle. In cognitive behavioral therapy, they talk about how your thoughts influence your feelings, and your feelings influence your actions. So if you know about those, if you know about that cycle, then you will build a strong safeguard against what you think. And for us PhD and master's and research students, a lot of times we really are impatient about a lot of things. So you see your colleagues publishing papers, you see your friends finishing and leaving you and all of that. And it tends to affect a lot of, so patience in the process, being humble to seek help, finding a support system to help you understand that it's not just you. And when I speak of support system, one place you can find one is Twitter. There's academic Twitter, there's PhD chat. When I started my PhD, I dropped my old Twitter account. I started a new one, and I found a community there. You go there, whatever problem you describe, there's like 100 other people who have experienced the same problem. So knowing that it's not just you also boosts your mental health, and yeah, seeking support in that way. I'm hoping I was able to that one. Yeah.
No, absolutely. No, you brought many excellent points, and also ways that people can navigate that for themselves. Would anyone like to add anything before I move on to the next question?
Oh, I wanted to say I started yoga with Adrian during lockdown, and that's been a big help. I think like we do so much with our minds. We're in front of the screens all day. We're typing things up. We're reading papers, and often we forget to do something physical with our bodies, or even just to expose our faces to sunlight. I think that's really important. And like James was saying, having a good support system. I always say, and I had this conversation with Anne before she started her PhD, I said, and you choose the supervisors. Don't choose it based on an establishment. Don't choose them based on, if they're A-rated or whatever the case is. Choose them so that they're supportive. Make sure you've got a good team behind you, because ultimately you're going to be working closely together. You're going to be dependent on them. Their feedback and the way you work together is important. So when choosing supervisors, just bear that in mind. A lot of times we try to push students toward, don't stay in the same place, or, you need to go where the research is being pumped out. And honestly, the biggest benefit to your career would be working with a strong team that help you build that foundation, because these are the really important years that will shape your view of academia, your view of your research work. And then also, like James was saying, find not like-minded people necessarily, because sometimes it's good that we call each other out just to keep each other in check, but build this community. And I think that academic Twitter has been really important for people this year, because we haven't been able to connect and engage in person. And many of us have started these relationships and networks from social media. So when people say don't play on your phone, just mute that, because I mean you're working, you're having a good time, or you're unwinding. You're allowed to be human. I think that that's something scientists, like, there's this impression that we have to be perfect all the time. We have to only tweet about science, and you can't separate science from society. You can't say science is apolitical. As a scientist, I'm apolitical, because being Black people, being Africans, our entire existence has been politicized. So we engage in these things, and it's important to us, because before I'm a scientist, I'm a woman of color. That's who I'll be every single day. So I think that that's also important to bear in mind, because there's so many issues that disproportionately affect Black people, Black scientists, Black women in particular. So keeping that in mind and trying to kind of not lower our expectations of ourselves, but I think we can be extremely harsh. My harshest critic is always me. So I think we sometimes need to give ourselves a break, especially during COVID-19 and this pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I loved how you expressed how you're human. Even if you're a scientist, you're a human, and you're allowed to enjoy things outside of your science. I think that's an important thing to remember. I'm gonna pose one last question before we go into the Q&A to Bonaventure. What have you found to be the most challenging part of your path so far, and what have you done to overcome those challenges?
Well, that's a tough question. Well, honestly don't know how to answer the question, because it is so vast and I have so much experience about it. Well, let me just start and just maybe tell you about one experience that I have. For
Yeah.
instance, it was back in Russia, and yeah, me and my brother, we used to take part into AI competitions, and funny enough, everywhere we're only the black ones. I mean, black two ones. So maybe there is a crowd of 7,000 people, but only those those people are in there. And when people look at you or look at us, it was like, well, as if we really don't belong to the place, something like that. And it was a constant, uh, let me say, fight for us, because we had to prove them there. I don't want to call out for racism there, but it was, I don't know, but it was somehow showing that they were looking at us as people who were not belonging to the place, like who shouldn't be there, something like that. And yeah, most of the time we managed and we finished best. And one of the time we finished best, and that shocked me, even not shocked us, was a regional stage of a competition where we came, and of course we took our task, and We sat down there for 3 days, coding, just in our words. And the day they deliberated and found out that we were best, they came to us. They were like, okay, when we saw you coming in, we didn't have a clue that you would come this far. Honestly, you amazed us. So we were like, okay. Then they went like, do you have a Russian girlfriend? Or are you planning to marry a Russian girlfriend? Well, like, I was like, hell no, I'm not. Then they just said, well, we cannot let you go further because you are not Russian. Like that. So the most biggest challenge I think I have encountered so far was being an African. And I think it's everywhere. And I think it's one of the major challenge each of us here have. Even when we go back to our countries, or maybe I will speak about Benin, government or people would prefer taking services of someone who is, let me say, from France or maybe from the United States to do the same thing that you would do rather than employing you or something like that. So I would say that's my major difficulty. That's my major let me say challenge that I'm trying to fight every day.
Absolutely.
And showing that being an African is actually not how will I say it? I don't know the word in English.
But being an African is not, it doesn't take
a
away
fatality, exactly. I would say fatality. Yeah, like it's not like as if we cannot do what other people can do. And
Absolutely.
for that, I had to prove that I had to work 2 or 3 or maybe 4 times more than people do. So that's why most of my friends, they will call me a robot, or maybe people will just text me when they are about to sleep, text me back when they are awake, and they will be like, well, Bona, finally, when do you have time to sleep? Something like that. But yes. So I think that was the main challenge for me. Still a challenge, and that's how I'm trying to overcome it. Just trying to learn more because, as they say, knowledge is power. So that's
absolutely. Thank you for that answer. I think many of us can resonate to that, where you feel underestimated because of where you're from. That's definitely an experience I think many Africans have. And also just, if you do go back, are people valuing you and employing actual Africans and not foreigners to do the same jobs that they have people to do in the countries? But yeah, with that, I'm going to move into some of the questions that we got. We have about 10 minutes to go. So I would like to first pose the first question, and anyone is open to answer. Just unmute yourself and answer. So a question from Elaine is, how did you find your passion in science, and how did you maintain this passion, especially in 2020, considering the year we've just had?
Can I take that? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Elaine, for your question. I would say for me, I found my parents sort of ignited my passion in science. So when we were a lot younger, my mom studied education, I think business education, vocation and tech, something around that area. And she used to tell us about her experiences when she goes to interviews, job interviews, teaching job interviews. She used to tell us about how there's just so many people competing for a few slots in the non-science fields. And then for physics, chemistry, biology, mathematics, there were only few teachers who come for such interviews, and all of them were taken. And she will come back to tell us how, there's so much opportunity in science subjects, even in the teaching field, in the teaching sector. And, at that age, young people, children, listen to their parents, their parents are their models. So she was telling us those things, we were taking it all in. And very naturally and quite seamlessly, when it was time to make that decision to either choose science or non-science, we easily went in because she had exposed us to the career opportunities in science. I have 5 other siblings and all of us are in science. Particularly for me, I used to also help my dad in his pharmacy shop when I was a little girl. And it just made me comfortable around the big names, the scientific names and stuff. So I think that these two experiences helped me in finding my passion in STEM. I didn't do pharmacy anyways, but I had an idea of my career path. Quite early in life, I knew what I wanted to achieve quite early. It changes every now and again, but the goal is still the same. And I was lucky enough to have a career path quite early. So that has kept me or maintained my passion because I have an idea, I have a goal, I know where I'm getting to. Sometimes it looks difficult, but I keep going. Yes, I think that would be my response.
Does anyone else want to add how they've, particularly how have they kept their passion going in this difficult year?
Can I? Yeah, this year has been terrible for a number of reasons, and I think that what's kept me going is the fact that although there are pros and cons to all of these online discussions and online meetings, it's enabled me to participate in a lot of talks, to sit in on a lot of different conferences, to still feel engaged within the research community. And I think that something that I particularly liked this year was that there was this shift in conversation, and there were all of these talks about indigenous knowledge and how do we decolonize science. And it was from scholars from all over the world, from different minority groups. And so the fact that it felt more accessible, I mean, we were speaking about conferences earlier, and Doreen said she only went to did her first poster presentation as a PhD. And I mean, we look at the cost of these big conferences. It's always us trying to travel to the USA, and it breaks. I mean, the research budget is already 5 to 0, and then we have to kind of like milk the last we can out of it to be able to attend conferences. So in that way, it felt more accessible to us, particularly, in the sense of conferences and networking. I think that was a big motivation. And then again, like I said, we're human. We were allowed to have a bad year. We were allowed to not be as productive as we always are. We were allowed to have slow days or sad days or days we couldn't work. And I think what got me through this year was giving myself the benefit of the doubt. It was a pandemic. You did not have to, come up with the next great thing. You just kind of had to get through.
Absolutely brilliant point, and I think we all needed that reminder because especially as academics and in science, we can be quite hard on ourselves and be like, oh, I didn't generate enough data, I didn't do enough this, but this year was not a normal year for anyone, so it's completely understandable if you weren't able to achieve what you normally would. Yes, you want to add something, Bonaventure?
Yeah, I wanted to add something to everything other great scientists just said. Me, my greatest motivation, honestly, is like I used to tell myself, I wanna, I don't know how I would like to live to be immortal. If you ask someone today, or maybe a scientist or someone, a young person who wants to do career in science, if you ask that young boy, young girl, the person he would like to be like, he will straightly point out, I don't know, maybe Zuckerberg, or maybe those Western people. We don't have African figures that are gonna be like references, people that our people will proudly reference to. And that's one of my main motivation, to be or to become, for the generations to come, someone that we proudly look at and proudly be like, well, I want to be like him. Surely, probably gonna do much more as modernly, but already something an African figure they are referring to. We don't have that today, and yeah, always referring to people or to scientific figures from the Western countries will always make them feel like, oh, well, I need to go abroad to be like them. But if we bring everything down to Africa, to the continent, if we have everything we need, then I think, like I read in a post a few days ago, uh, Africa is on the good path to have to be the continent that we have the more of AI experts and scientists in the next maybe decade, years, or something like that. So, I mean, that's one of my dreams, and that's my motivation to be something heroic for people that will come, maybe this generation or the next one,
Absolutely.
but that will still have me as a major figure to take example at. So it might be any of us here, but yeah, that's me, and I felt important to point that out.
Yeah, absolutely. That's thank you for sharing that, and I think it is important. It's quite a task to take on to want to be a role model to people, but I think it is really important, and that's part of the work we've tried to do with Visibility STEM is to showcase people like the four of you, so that the next generation has people that look like them, have their background as reference points, and they can see that I can aspire to this. So I think that's such an important point to note. And even if you're not trying to be a role model, just the fact that you are doing the work you're doing and you're occupying these spaces is already powerful for young Africans who want to aspire to this. So I'm going to ask one last question because we're out of time, and I'm going to put James on the spot. What's just one piece of advice you'd like to give to any young Africans who are maybe earlier on in their STEM journey? I know we have some undergrads and maybe even some high school people here today. What would you just like to tell them about just a word of advice as they start to map their own path forward?
I'm very bad at giving advice, but yeah, I'll try. I think things have changed. The visibility of science and academia has changed since I did my undergrad. When I was doing my undergrad, I knew nothing about papers. I knew nothing about. I saw professors as those bearded old men in an office where you could never walk into. It was like holy ground. The first time I met a young, like Bonaventure said, the first time I met a very young professor was in Senegal. So I met a professor. I saw he looked almost like me, and he was a professor. I was like, what? That doesn't happen in Ghana. Like, you can't be a professor. Yeah. Long story short, you can do whatever you want. The world is flexible enough to take you in. Don't let where you come from limit what you want to be. Don't think I come from a poor background, so I cannot aspire to be this Mark Zuckerberg or whoever. You can be whoever you want to be. Just aim, work really hard, do a lot of research, and look for mentors. That's something I didn't grow up having. I didn't grow up having mentors, but they're really important. And take leaps of faith. Like Doreen said, the first time she did a poster session was during her PhD. The first time I did my poster session was during my master's. And I've had other Africans take those leaps where even as undergrads, they've written research papers and presented at conferences they've been taken in. People like to see us young people thrive these days. It's not like back then where people were trying to push us down. So just I am one to propose keeping an open mind. People like to keep a rigid plan for their future. I like to keep an open plan. So if you want to follow my kind of advice, I would say be open-minded. If you studied physics, it doesn't mean you end up being a physics professor. You could study physics and end up being a marine biologist. Yeah. So keep an open mind and just let take whatever opportunities come in. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Excellent advice to end this panel. On that note, I would like to thank the four of you for taking your time to be here, for sharing your perspectives with us. This has just been such a brilliant panel, and we'll be sure to link all your socials as well in the chat for all those who want to connect with you and keep the conversations going. But yeah, thank you so much. Very grateful for this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.